you have any question, on behalf of the acting country director, Mr. Hamza Tijani, and the head of programs, Mr. William Mafwara, I'm presenting this press release. On September 5th, anticipated fiscal accountability for inequality reduction, FAIR4ALL Media Colloquium and Exhibition took place in Abuja. The event, led by Oxfam in Nigeria and supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Netherlands, marked a pivotal movement in the ongoing effort to combat inequality and promote fairness in society. The FAIR4ALL project, now in its third year, has achieved significant milestone within the framework of its Oxfam country strategy during the second year of implementation. These accomplishments include notable outcomes, compelling human interest stories collected by the media team, successful monitoring visits, strengthened partnership, and improved regulatory framework, and mobilization of numerous communities to advocate for a just distribution of natural resources and inclusive participation in policy-making process. Beyond the project's boundaries, the Just Economic Pillar of the OCS has displayed a complementary role by advancing access to finance and input for rural farmers, engaging in the budget process, supporting youth entrepreneurship, promoting fair taxation, civic inclusion, climate and gender justice. At the core of the FAIR4ALL events is a shared vision, a vision of society where opportunities are not privileges, but birthrights. Wealth is distributed equitably and voices are heard, regardless of gender or background. The concept of fairness is not just a term, but a lived reality that participants are working tirelessly to achieve, said the country director at the event. A highlight of the event was a panel session featuring government agencies, including the National Environmental Standards and Regulatory Agency, the National Human Rights Commission, the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, NOSDRA, Code of Conduct Bureau, and the Nigerian Labour Congress. The panel discussion addressed several key focus points. 1. Collaborative effort against corruption. Participants called for closer collaboration between organizations dedicated to combating corruption, such as the CCB, and civil society organizations to intensify efforts in pursuit of tax justice, addressing the root causes of corruption within the nation. 2. Engaging key stakeholders. Recognizing the limitation of sustained advocacy efforts, it was emphasized that engaging key stakeholders, including government agencies, in initiatives beyond the scope of CSOs is imperative. Utilizing NOSDRA's directory. A directory tool released by NOSDRA was actually highlighted as a vital resource. Advocates urge its annual utilization to assess local government, states and communities, facilitating identifying and remedying areas affected by oil spillage. Government non-state actors collaboration. The collaboration between government entities and non-state actors was deemed paramount to achieving shared goals. Enhanced cooperation is expected to yield more impactful outcomes within the program. Involvement of National Human Rights Commission. It was stressed that the National Human Rights Commission should be involved in the inception of various rights-related projects to build synergy with grassroots mobilization efforts. The use of National Human Rights Commission toll-free directory for registering complaint and concern was encouraged. Addressing environmental complaints. The National Environmental Standard and Regulatory Enforcement Agency, NESRA, expressed readiness to address complaints related to environmental degradation. A progressive partnership with civil society organizations was encouraged to safeguard the environment as the nation makes effort towards just energy transition, net zero by 2060. The FAIR4ALL Media Colloquium and Exhibition provided a platform for diverse stakeholders to engage in constructive dialogue and strategize for a fair, equitable, just society. The commitment of government agencies, the diplomatic community, and civil society to collaborate towards these goals is a promising step towards the right direction. This is signed by the country director and other partners present
administrations that have been established in some of the states. Take, for instance, Delta State, Akwa Ibom, and Cross River State, and that we have built relationships with previous government in terms of implementation of certain core aspects of this project. We will be expecting that they too will embrace the whole idea of raising the bar with regards to fiscal accountability and using this as a basis to again improve the challenges and deal with the challenges of inequality in our different communities. We're also very, very interested in helping and supporting continually communities who we now refer to as community right holders to again be very involved from the very beginning, from the outset, in many of the projects that we'll be implementing going forward.
A partner organization with Oxfam has food soldiers at the sub-national level, and that is a tax justice and governance platform. And at that sub-national level, several organizations make up the groups at that sub-national level, which engage communities and governments at the state level to ensure tax fairness, and also engage communities to come up with their prioritized needs, which they organize into a community development document that is signed by the government, which is the supply side of development at that level to provide the needs of the communities as prioritized by the communities. And they also engage to ensure that women are brought into the process of leadership and governance at that level, where we ask for women inclusion in decision-making processes. And then tax education is another thing that is done at that level. They educate the public on the best way to pay tax, why they should pay tax, and what the taxes they pay for are used for by the government. And that is to develop and provide the needs that are needed by the citizens at that level.
To gather around yesterday to kind of pat their backs on the results and achievements that they have achieved over the years of intervention nationally and especially at the sub-national levels. So continuing from where my colleague Nancy spoke, one of the key features of the achievements we had at the sub-national level would be that we were able to establish a tax-to-service compact between local government councils and the communities with them, especially the markets where we've had all kinds and sorts of things happening within that level. And so having a tax-to-service compact where local governments put aside a percentage of the revenue they generate from the markets and from communities to develop the communities is one of the results that we have seen, and that would help also to narrow the inequity gap that there are within that ambit. One of the gains or the lessons for me as we looked at the successes and results that we achieved yesterday is the fact that tax is a veritable fiscal instrument to fight inequality. Because when you look at the purposes of taxation, especially one of the R's, when you talk about purposes of taxation, there are 4 R's: revenue, repricing, redistribution, and representation. It seems government focuses more on revenue, so they just generate revenue. But you can use taxes to close the inequality gap by using one of the R's, which is redistribution, where you take from the rich more to impact and provide services for the poor. I think in Nigeria, the poor pay more taxes than the rich are paying, and I think that's something we need to look at, and government needs to look at that area critically. We should all pay taxes, but we should see value for the taxes we are paying, and that's some of the things that have come out of our interventions in this area since when particularly the Tax Justice and Governance Platform led by CISLAC in Akwa Ibom State came into the picture, and some of the results that we've achieved, encourages us and shows that if taxes are properly utilized and the concept of tax is used in the way that it should be used, then the inequality gap can be narrowed. Citizens will be happy to pay taxes. You can't have people pay taxes and they still generate their own electricity, still generate their own water, and still build their own roads, clean their own drains with their costs. And government is taking taxes and aren't doing so much about that. And that's where the tax service compact comes in. So my recommendation to not just the subnational governments and the local governments, but at the national level, is that the approach of tax to service should be looked at critically, and then evaluate some of the tax expenditures that they have done to see that sunset clauses are put in place, and that the tax exemptions that they've given within the ambit of tax expenditure is such that it's beneficial both to state and to individual citizens in the country. Thank you.
Your Kebekache Women Development and Resource Center is very grateful for their partnership with Oxfam, because this partnership has yielded so many results and are bridging the gaps of social inequalities, and also enabling the citizens to begin to ask questions and speak out when necessary. Because in the program we did yesterday, there were indications that so many community members are still asking questions, and that has started yielding positive results. Again, the program of public hearing that this program of Oxfam and Kebekache has resulted in bylaw that is coming up in Abuja local government. I will encourage Oxfam to see how they work closely with Kebekache Women Development and Resource Center to sensitize the women before the public hearing, and also to mobilize these women to attend massively on the day of the public hearing. That will enhance women participation and ownership of that bylaw. And it is when they know about this law and the clauses and sections in the bylaw, they will actually stand by everything in the law, because it is better when you have known what the law talks about your well-being. It will also give you that ability to stand to defend when your right is being infringed. I will also want to call on the NDAs that attended the program yesterday, who probably implement government policies on issues that bridge the gaps in inequality and social inclusion, to, with immediate effect, begin to implement those laws. Because it is only when these laws are implemented that these gaps will close further, and the citizens of this country will begin to derive the benefit that government ought to provide for them. And then it will also enhance more growth for the country. It is only when the citizens are rich that the country becomes rich. But if everybody feels that it doesn't concern them, we may not have a future. And that's why Oxfam and Kebekache partnership is very key. And I will also encourage Oxfam to continue to do what they are doing, because they are impacting life. And it is when this is done that we'll have a society that will be good for all of us. Thank you.
Lawal. I'm an Oxfam inequality champion and currently the Chief Executive of Connected Development. We're really excited about this existing ongoing partnership between Oxfam and Connected Development, particularly on the FAIR4ALL campaign. Connected Development led a national campaign around the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act. We were part of the group that ensured that the National Assembly passed it into law and the President signed. And we all know the implication of this. Yes, the government has removed fuel subsidy. Today we're currently experiencing inflation. Also, citizens are bearing the brunt on multiple taxation. And when you look at inequality, it has widened because of all of these indicators. And for us, we'll say, how can we ensure that the savings from the removal of fuel subsidy can be fairly and justly distributed to the Federation, and particularly to people at the subnational level and the grassroots. And I want to focus on the Host Community Development Trust Fund. Because when you look at the Petroleum Industry Act, there's a provision where 3% is set aside for host communities. With support from Oxfam, we've raised awareness, we've built capacity, but most importantly, we've sensitized community members to know what their rights are and demand and ensure that when these monies are paid into a dedicated account, it is jointly managed and the host communities, which we call right holders, add their voice to the implementation of these resources while we ensure transparency and accountability. But I think one lesson I took from yesterday is how you see development partners, government agencies, both regulatory authorities and civil societies coming together to work for the interests of the Nigerian people. I believe if we continue in this stead, would ensure that there's fair and equitable distribution of Nigeria's wealth, which will help reduce various social vices. Thank you.
As also are able to access capital and also access improved seedlings for their farms, right? What it also means is that we collaborate with government agencies like the Bank of Agriculture, for example, to make it easy for these farmers to meet those conditions that enable them to access finance for their farms. What it also means is that we provide them with subsidized fertilizer, yeah, where they are able to access such and also help their crop yield. It means additionally that farmers can also come together, organize themselves in what we call village savings and loan scheme, you know, where they are able to contribute little money here and there and are able to use those monies to either buy improved seeds for themselves, access fertilizer, but again, it also gives them some kind of social capital for them to feel even more adequate, you know, to approach bank facilities to get those loans. You know, I give you an example, right? There was a farmer who has never seen 5,000 naira all his life, and he was 40 years old. You know, this scheme helped him to be able to organize, you know, within his community, save little money to the point where he was able to withdraw 5,000 naira off his own for the very first time. So these are some of the initiatives that particular component your question is speaking to addresses.
Yeah. Okay, so starting with the issue of palliatives, like you rightly mentioned, palliatives just scratches the surface, and then there's a tendency that there will be a light capture of the palliatives. Some politicians can use it as a patronage item. Already, the DSS, from the news I read this morning, has arrested some persons with the palliative, particulars, as it were. And so that's the challenge with this issue of palliatives in terms of rice and beans and meats. And of course, there's also the challenge about the cash transfers, where a certain amount of money had been proposed, and in a country where we don't have a social register that has integrity, that makes it quite a challenge. But like you were pointing out in your question, because you asked the question and also provided the solution somewhat, the fact that we could be looking at other things. If I were the president, I probably would be starting with looking at local production of petrol, because that's what controls the economy. Also be putting elaborate efforts to ensure that this country within the next 2-3 months begins to enjoy a minimum of 18 hours of electricity. All right, that would go a long way to help. So when we hear comparisons that, in Saudi Arabia they're selling petrol for $5,000 a liter, in UK they're selling petrol for £1 or £3 or £10 a liter, we looked at who needs petrol in the UK. They have 24 hours electricity, they have the train, the tram, and the buses. All right, so who needs some of us standing here have been there, and you probably didn't ride in private vehicles when you were there, because you had the tram, the trains, and the buses to ride by. And that's something that we don't have here. And so we need to begin to look at the transportation system to ensure that we provide that. So it's a good thing to see that we have the Blue Rail in Lagos, but that isn't enough. We need to begin to look at that at all the subnational levels and nationally, so that traveling from, say, Akwa Ibom to Abuja would just be a matter of a few hours going by train. So these are things we should look at. So those are things that we should really be looking at as palliatives, subsidizing transportation, building a strong transportation system, looking at issues of production. We are mainly consuming right now. So if a certain particular candidate has been talking about consumption, from consumption to production. It's for very important reason. If you are not producing, no matter what you do, whether floating the dollar, the naira, or whatever else, there's not going to be any effect until we are able to produce what other nations would need. That's how we can shore up our naira and make our naira strong against the dollar. And then there are also other macro policy decisions that also needs to be taken in terms of, for instance, making ourselves part of the BRICS bloc, which we aren't there. We attended the meeting, but we're not part of that. These are things that we should be looking at critically. On the issues of the IDP, civil society organizations are doing a lot. International development agencies are there at the IDPs providing. In fact, what we usually say is that civil society we do very wicked work. We are there in the places where government can't get to. So without civil society, I'm not sure that the IDPs will even be livable, as it were, right now. So, so the problem, we can only speak about the issues, and we can only do as little as we are doing, providing food, providing so-called Medicare, and clothing to the best of the ability of civil society. What government can do is begin to look at the issue of solving insecurity, because that's the root cause, of people being displaced. So if we can solve and again, the root cause of that, when you dig further, is the issue of inequality. So if people are gainfully employed, they wouldn't be subject to be recruited into terrorism. So that's not there. Government has more critical role to play in this direction than what civil society would do. Let me tell you another thing about civil society I was sharing with my brother here this morning. Nigeria doesn't need development aid. Nigeria has, its budget alone tells you, the total development aid in the country doesn't come up to 2% of our national budget. That tells you a lot of story. All right. Whereas in Ghana is about 35% of their national budget. That tells you the impact that development aid would cost in Ghana. So these are things we need to look at. All right. So government needs to get their act right. If you talk about the IDPs, you'll be focusing more on government, and that's what civil society has been doing. All right. And so you also talked about the issue of journalists being banned and what is civil society doing. SERAP is a civil society organization. They're taking the government to court, asking them to reinstate the journalists that have been sent. And I don't understand that. But I tell you, nothing concrete is done about that. You would find that would be the beginning of the constricting of the space for journalism, for the media in the country. So we are working on that. We are looking at that. I know that the way we are, our ecosystem is such that different civil society organizations are involved in one thing or the other, and different aspects of it. So SERAP is there, and they got the full support of civil society organizations across the country in the work that they are doing to ensure that they push back on the pushback of the government. And those are things that we are doing. I'm sure some of my colleagues will want to add to that.
And again, majorly government should invest in transportation. I was also thinking that a new government that has come in place, that has stopped fuel subsidy, all they have done is to invest massively in transportation, wherein every state will have at least between 100 or above of massive transport scheme, where a transport cost will not be more than 100,000 no matter the distance. And if that happens within the state, but if you are going outside the state, they will also reduce the cost of travel. Instead of reducing buying palliative, they would have used that to cost this inflation that is going on. If the massive transport scheme is all over the state, that can charge at least 100,000 no matter the distance within the state, 100 naira, within the state, that will reduce cost. People will not feel, especially the poor, will not feel the impact of the fuel subsidy that is removed. And the whole inflation rate will also drop. Again, in the issue of gagging of the civil speak by banning the journalists from ASROC, Nigeria have a very bad image. The more the government shrink the civil space, the more our image deteriorates. It is good for the government. The government spokesperson, the day he was announced, one of the promises he made is that they would not do what the previous government has done, that they will be fair and they will tell Nigerians the truth. So no matter what is the issue, no media houses should be banned from covering ASROC. Instead, government should be open to the citizens, because what the media does is to report issues as it is. And so when government is open, I don't think there is any need to sustain any media house on issues they report. If government is very open, the media will also report what is being said. I think that is the way I expect the government to behave.
So maybe final reaction.
A civic space influencing strategy that's focused on opening up the space for citizens to engage, not just civil society organizations, but citizens in general to be able to engage in policy process in their own governance. And for us, that's quite important. Also inclusive is the media as well. At that time, that was where we started hearing about the gagging of the media, the review of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation Act at the time. And we quite engaged with government. Before then, it was the NGO regulatory bill that was at the floor of the assembly. And trust me, that bill has kept resurfacing every single new assembly. And no doubt if we see it in this assembly again. The other law that we also kicked against at the time was the fake news bill, so to say. The fake news bill that was in the House at the time. We also engaged various stakeholders and key committees in Parliament to also stop that bill from being passed. So we're trusting that with concerted engagement, with civil society and with the media like you, we will have even stronger voices to keep fighting against this kind of draconian bill that keeps resurfacing in the House. What is also important to note is that even look at the time Twitter was banned and Facebook was also threatened. Yeah. So if you, the media, that's why we keep bringing you closer to what we do, so that you keep understanding what we are doing. Recently, Code actually built capacity for media, practitioners, particularly investigative journalists, for you to be more detailed in your reportage, be more interested in some of those salient news that you don't quite see in public places, so that you dig deeper into it and bring it out to the surface. So yes, we're doing a lot to keep the civic space broad and wide. And so that's why we look at civic space not just from one perspective, it's from various perspectives. There are various dimensions of civic space, like censorship. These days you go to the media, you're quite not comfortable saying certain things or using certain words. You're asked to withdraw such words. Like regulatory framework, how open is our regulatory framework, yeah? Civicus has rated Nigeria as shrinking, yeah? That's our civic space now. So how do we open it up or keep it that green as much as it can be? So yes, we're doing quite a lot, and we'll keep doing what we're doing, and we'll keep seeing how we can invest more in our civic space strategy and open that space for all of us to engage.
To the end of this press conference.